think in our lifetimes, we have seen the most remarkable transformation of a country that exported talent to a country that started being seen as an opportunity to now seen as a country that will export ideas and export the change that the world wants to see.
Intelligence can be used even with a noisy mind. Intuition will never be tapped in with a noisy mind. It's like that top layer of the water. Unless it is still, you will not be able to see what is there at the bed of that river. So for intuition, we need a very silent mind.
Technology is actually, putting you more in that echo chamber and making you, believe because you made some choices, it suddenly technology recognizes that that's probably what you need more of.
Yeah.
So we are also getting polarized probably as a society. A very warm welcome to another edition of the ThinkRight Podcast with our glowing sister PK Shivani and a very leading visionary leader in the technology and content space, Kiran Mani, who has moved from the US after 14 years at Google to be here in India and really see how you can shape this industry today. So really excited to have you here with us and have a conversation around a subject that is in the minds of every young, youthful Indian. How do we bring the best of technology, content, and still, drive home that one big message of, empowering people, becoming the best version of themselves, getting involved in a subject that is truly going to transform the inner being. So thank you for being here. Kiran, maybe you start with you, in this conversation about this shift from the US to India. You've recently come back and, how has this shift been and what are some of those, changes you've seen, coming back to India from the US after such a long time outside of this country?
First of all, Rajan and Shivani Didi, thank you for having me on the show. You mentioned a few things about how could we use this as an opportunity to shape the future of India? That's what excites me the most. In fact, that's the grounding principle on why we came back to look like if you abstract the story a little bit, I think many of our stories will coincide that we left India at a time when opportunities were more in Western countries. We took our education, we took our skill sets, and we applied it in a place where we thought that it is valued more than our own homeland. But that narrative has changed like how? I think in the last 5 years, I do believe that I think in our lifetimes, we have seen the most remarkable transformation of a country that exported talent to a country that started being seen as an opportunity to now seen as a country that will export ideas and export the change that the world wants to see. So look, in some way, I must say that I've been very opportunistic in returning back at a time when I believe this country can contribute so much. But I think it's also a very opportune time in many of our lives where we have hit that point where we start asking the question saying that it's not just your economic independence or the convenience of life that really motivates you anymore. The compelling need to give back, the compelling need to grow children in an environment which we believe is the right environment for them to grow. And just being close to family, just being close to people, the loved ones. I think all that, it gave more than one reason for us to move back.
I've made the same choice over 2 decades ago.
I know, we spoke about it.
I know, and it is absolutely enriching and enlightening to hear this because I think there are so many people who think about what will it mean if we move back and raise our kids in India, right, before they become global citizens and people who can make and shape and change the world. And I think the time is now for India over the next couple of decades to really come up in the center of the world, assume a position of global leadership and impact change. So in light of that, having a conversation around something that is so Indian,
Yes.
and which has been really exported from India to the world around mindfulness and all these practices that have been there in India for, centuries. Today the world realizing the the importance of that. So, I think it's a great opportunity, and people like you, will inspire so many others to kind of do the same. But as we are discussing, it's good to really think through a little bit on this, the richness of what we are talking today in terms of mindfulness, the ability to be able to use our thoughts to shape, our situations rather than being responsive to situations. So, I know, Sister Shivani, you always talk about this and we've discussed this, but the origins and the root of this, from India, how has it shaped up, and how do you see that unlocking in the future?
See, Bharat, the Akhand Bharat, is the ancient civilization. Many other countries are the modern civilization. So that ancient civilization is very rich, not just in wealth, for which many countries of the world came to India, but it's very rich in its culture and its heritage and its spiritual principles, which were not called spiritual, but they were just the principles of life. So the power of the mind is something that has been used in Bharat for absolutely everything that you're doing for thousands of years. So we have two laws. One is Sankalp se Srishti. This is a law. So now many children in Bharat wouldn't know this law, that this is a spiritual law. Ki Sankalp se Srishti bante hai, which means my thoughts create my world. So whether it's my feelings, influencing the health of my body, my relationships, my work, my environment. So that's my world. It's getting created here. We are living the opposite equation. We are saying the world is creating my thoughts and emotions. So going against the law. And the other one is Sankalp se Siddhi, which means any thought you hold on to, you affirm it, it will become a reality. Many of our children just know it today as law of attraction, law of manifestation, which is okay. That's their vocabulary. As long as they know the law right, that's perfectly fine. But in Bharat, it's been there since thousands of years. So in both the laws, it's only telling us focus here. It's all going to happen here. You think right, your world will be right. You think right, your reality will be right, because you're going to affirm that thought. But once I am not using that law, then I'm not taking care of my thoughts. I'm taking care of everything else, because I'm thinking if everything else is fine, then I will be happy. So we just have gone the other way around. So just to go back to the basics.
Yeah. So as we move towards a Viksit Bharat,
yes.
and see India becoming developed with these principles as the driving factors of change, I think, we're going to see a great transformation in the years ahead. And, Kiran, you're here to help drive that change in an area which is around technology and content and places where a large number of people in India today are spending time.
Oh, yes.
So how do you see this convergence of technology and content and mindfulness actually coming to play in your role as you shape this journey for the youth of India?
So, Rajan, I'll pick up from, I've always found this interesting. Didi has a simple way of explaining things which is complex, but it also comes, there's an insight there. I think one of the things when you come from the US, which you admire, is their ability to make the most of the intellect, right? They value intellectual purity. They value intellectual honesty, and with it comes a lot of advancement. So I think humanity owes it to the Western world, and they've used a lot of Indian minds for it too. But that ability to be disciplined with your intellect and produce tools which humanity has benefited, I think we've all gained from a lot from the Western way of thinking. And I think that's something to celebrate, right? I think they take that.
Absolutely.
But what I also find is we are living a very interesting time where the intellect has done its job. It's given us the tools. It's given us conveniences. It's given us answers. And most importantly, I think we are living in an era where we have unprecedented amount of time. So I think one of the things that always amazes me is when I look at the world from where I came, there are answers available, answers which required humans to solve for earlier. And now what is being asked of them is don't give me answers, actually give me the questions for the future, right? From solutions, people are being asked for decisions. So there's a fundamental shift. And I always believe that decisions is a world where intellect cannot take you. That's the world of intuition. That's the world where you have to put together multiple sets of knowledge that you have, but you have to let yourself go. You have to let yourself explore. And, many a times the word creativity is used in the world of, artistic senses. But I believe today's world of business, leadership, everything is about being creative. And I think that's an area where India has a science built around this. I get goosebumps when I think about it. So in my view, it's an amalgam of two amazing constructs in the world. One that has really furthered the power of intellect. And I think the future is going to be the power of intuition and the power of mindfulness. And what better place than being at the amalgam of this beginning to happen.
Yeah, and linked to these words that you're using of creativity, we've now got this creator economy, which is getting individuals to unleash their creativity in ways which are so different and, actually creating a world that will be influenced by so many minds and so differently. But, going a little deeper into this intuition and intellect and actually being able to, I don't know, is it a balance of the two, the way you see it? Is it something that, the intuition will give the right solution just for the minds of, people who use logic to arrive at, or science goes in a particular way? Because intuition, even today, when one talks of intuition, one talks more of spirituality. Yes. Because science probably hasn't proven some of the laws we started talking about. But since we are talking on this subject, how would a common person try and understand the difference between the two, and how should they apply it really in their lives? Because I'm sure you're applying it in multiple ways.
So Rajan, I'll attempt the complex answer, and I want to hear the
I'm going to go to her after this.
Look, I think we always talk about body, mind, and intellect in our way of thinking in India, and it's three forms of intelligence that we have. So why should be one against the other? We are blessed with saying that a generation of kings and a generation of rulers in the world actually fine-tuned the body intellect. There was a time when warriors were leaders, right? Because at that time, leadership was all about the one who understood their instincts well, or sense of danger, a sense of how to capture the world. Today, that intelligence is most seen in the field of sports. You can't be a great sportsman if your body intelligence isn't up to it. Many of us have dulled that form of intelligence because we all live very comfortable lives. We all have probably become over-obsessed with the intellect form of intelligence. Nothing wrong with it. But I think sometimes, like in anything, too much of everything can actually produce imbalances. I think our intellect now runs wild. It controls us rather than it being a tool. And many of us are actually subjected by it, which I think is something which we have to correct. But how do you correct that? Which in my view is the third form of intelligence. And I feel that's the most powerful form of intelligence that we have. So look, I don't see that as a conflict. I actually see that as if you're able to leverage and find the balance between these three, you find your own centeredness. But with it, I think our collective, call it consciousness, is about these three forms of intelligence coming together. So in a very roundabout way, I'm saying I'm excited. I actually do think I'm an eternal, optimist. And I feel that we're living in an era where people are realizing that what they've done with the intellect isn't enough. So I think if a collective effort is made, the change is just around the corner.
Yeah. The collective consciousness at work, as you normally talk
two
of.
powers, right? Intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence and wisdom. Wisdom is innate. Intelligence could be learnt, acquired, developed.
Yeah.
So intuition will come from wisdom. Both are very important. But the more there's uncertainty in the outside world, even for a leader to take a decision, every time the seemingly logical decision today might not necessarily be right tomorrow. So silencing the mind. Intelligence can be used even with a noisy mind. Intuition will never be tapped in with a noisy mind. It's like that top layer of the water. Unless it is still, you will not be able to see what is there at the bed of that river. So for intuition, we need a very silent mind. Now, most of us are not working on creating a silent mind. We are in an era of overthinking. We believe that thinking more is good. Spirituality says thinking right and therefore thinking less. Because if you're thinking right, you're automatically thinking less. So we're not working on thinking less. We're working on thinking right. If I have a lot of waste thoughts, why did this, how did this, what if this? Obviously, there's noise. But if I just create one affirmative thought, this is it. All the other noise is automatically deleted. I don't have to delete thoughts. And when that starts happening, you're not just intuitive while you are meditating, which means you're not creating a stillness only while you're meditating. It will start from that you're experiencing that stillness during your meditation, but then gradually you're translating it into your work life. So you will start creating that one right thought in every situation, and then you will experience that stillness even in activity. Then you will reach a stage where you will experience that stillness even in a crisis, where everything outside would seem to be going wrong, where a lot of people around you may seem to be going chaotic, blame game and whatever. But your mind has just learnt it, that I, the mind, is not dependent on the situation. There can be chaos outside, but all the more need of the hour that I will need to be still. And now if that leader of an organization could experience that stillness when in a crisis, then the thought is going to come out of their wisdom and their intuition. And that thought which will come out of from their intuition and wisdom will not just be a solution to the issue, it will also be an empowerment for all the people. And that's what the leader needs to be, that power to empower people. Situations come, situations get okay. But that disempowerment that happens, that conflict that happens between people, the blame game, all this, that is what is depleting soul power, right? So intuitive thinking means silent mind, and that innate wisdom says, this is it. Sometimes logic would not agree with that, but we've all experienced it, that the answer which comes from the intuition is always right, provided you start trusting your intuition. But you will start trusting your intuition if you're experiencing it often. If I experience it only like once in a, then I don't trust it, because I said, what if that is not the right answer? But if you use it often and it's worked for you 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, 11th time, there is no need, there's no reason why you will doubt it. Now, that kind of leadership will be so important now in the coming times. Not just for the solution, but more important for the empowerment. That empowerment which is needed. So intelligence is very important. The wisdom to use the intelligence the right way. Like Kiran said, all this technology that we got through so much of hard work and intelligence of the countries. But along with that, did we get the wisdom to use it the right way? Now, in the next couple of years, we are going to get a lot more intelligent things. Everybody's already talking about it. Who is going to give us the wisdom how to use it? They will just give us that intelligent thing. And they'll say, here, this is a gift to mankind. But if mankind doesn't have the wisdom of how to use it, we might create another crisis in our life. So intelligence without wisdom is very dangerous, very dangerous. So they gave us Google, they gave us the phone, they gave us the internet, they gave us everything, but nobody gave us the wisdom, or we didn't tap into our wisdom, how to use, how much to use, where not to use. So then the same tools which are so beneficial, today the world is saying, because of this, my life is stressed. But it's not because of those tools that my life is stressed. It's because of my lack of wisdom to use those intelligent tools that my life is stressed. So that wisdom with intelligence will create magic.
And what you rightly said, this challenge is only going to grow further.
Only.
To what you
Now
were
we
saying,
know.
because when you talk of artificial
That's
intelligence,
what. So-
you're going to need natural not
Natural wisdom.
to be able to, at least use it well, and you, Kiran, while you were at Google, you did, before your meetings, tap into this silence that Sister Shivani was concerned, we're talking about, and, tell us a little bit about, some of those, stories and what impact it had, particularly around the workplace there. Yeah.
I think I was just picking on what Shivani Didi was saying, right? Again, learnings from the US is you impose anything on them, they will always object. They want to be sure that they have had the ability to evaluate everything from a true or positive sense. The topic of spirituality sometimes is covered up with too much of religion, too much of areas which can make a lot of people doubt it. And that is simply because over a period of time, when you want to see, the science of the mind isn't something which is straightforward like a mathematics. You have to learn to deal with it because it's situational, and it's in some way it is situational leadership. It cannot be fully taught. It has to be experienced. And when you try to basically put that into words, it quickly translates into religion or things where people can say, it doesn't appeal to my mind. And I think many societies struggle with this.
Very true.
So one thing which I find fascinating in this world is what comes to many of us just intuitively, right? The sense of how I feel, or the sense that when I just ask you to pause, what that pause is for, is not natural in other sectors. So I'll be honest, I struggled with that because, the power of a smile, the power of a human touch, whether it is with a child, the fact that you can ask somebody how they feel and it is okay. Culturally, these things have vast different implications than another one. And yet, I think I was always intrigued to say, how can I tap into that in a little bit? Small practices went a very long way. For example, I've shared this with Didi in a different forum where, we used to begin our leadership meetings with a 2-minute silence. And one of the reasons why I used to do that is because, otherwise the normal meetings, my leadership used to come together and our meetings would go on. It used to be an hour-long meeting. And every single time I used to keep the next 30, 45 minutes free because the meeting will never get over on time. And there were two things that will happen in the room. There was either an expression of intellectual superiority. When you bring in a lot of intelligent people, everyone has a point of view, and understandable. Or there is a feeling that somebody's totally switched off. They are either on their phone or on their laptops, and they feel either I'm not being valued or my point of view is not required in this. Simple things like saying that let's begin with a 2-minute silence. There was no forcing to say that you have to put your laptop down or other things. It was transformational. Two things happened immediately. Meeting started ending at 1 hour. And I think the bigger thing which we started finding in a 3-month time frame is we started going from actions to outcomes. Every leader started coming into the discussion saying that even without pointing it out, just the fact that people gave themselves the time not to react, but to respond. That 2 minutes meant that through the meeting, people will give themselves that little bit of a space where they're not reacting, but they're responding. I think that's the biggest transformation that we did. Without getting too much into the details, I was handling a role which was incredibly complex and very important for the company at that time. And none of us had the playbook on how to operate. That's the other thing that I've learned about leadership. Decisions are right in hindsight. They're never right when we are taking it. We're actually, all of us are in uncharted territory. That's what creates a crisis moment, right? Crisis is, I don't have a playbook to play.
Yeah.
And the only thing that you have in crisis is creativity, clarity, and 100% trust. How do you build that? There's no playbook to teach it. Creativity is all of us need to come together and agree that, there's a way. Then clearly communicating that with each other. And then trust. That is, in my view, the feast that mindfulness creates in abundance. And I began all of that with 2 minutes of silence. It's perhaps the most powerful tool that I've used in leadership. That the power of silence is far more than the power of words. And I think US was the first place where I experimented with it.
Yeah. Now, I think the silence, you use the word stillness, you use the word depth,
Yeah.
right? Tapping into that power that exists within each person. And if you do it collectively, then what you rightly said, the outcomes also are, collective outcomes that work well for everyone, including the company that you work for. So how do we get more companies and more leaders to do this? I mean, it's such a powerful thing that you just shared with us.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on, did you try to get more other leaders to do it, or how can we, what can we do to get this out a lot more?
It's again sharing just from my own experiences. I thought the US was challenging. But the good thing about them is when they see a good thing, they're very open to adopting it. And over a period of time, it doesn't take long for everyone to say, it works for me, and hence I'm just going to do it, right? So in sense that the very society that questions also embraces things very fast. I found that to be different after coming to India, where we all intuitively, I think it's amazing how you speak to anyone, and when they are relaxed, every conversation that you and I are speaking here is intuitive knowledge in an Indian household, right? Anyone who's listening to this conversation will turn around and say, whatever he's saying seems like, this is understood. And yet, sometimes our workplaces are probably far more chaotic. We all love talking over each other. We all end up being, anxiety. That's the one area where I'm amazed to say, while there's energy in India, the level of anxiety is also ratcheted up in ways I find that intriguing. Yet, I find the tools that I use are very different. Literally telling people for 2 minutes of silence is not going to work. You just have to model it. I think the key part is over here, if I can just make that one shift, that I don't react, but I am able to respond. It's not the big macro moments that matter. It is the micro moments that I'm finding extreme value in. And it is very easy to get carried away, Rajan. I'll be the first person to admit that emotions run high in this country. And that's what drives this nation. But also shaping that emotions requires an enormous degree of restraint, a continuous understanding of the principle of gratitude, and just being conscious. And as Didi rightly mentioned, it's no longer meditation that helps me, it's mindfulness that helps me. Because if I'm not conscious in the moment, I myself get carried away in no time.
Being mindful 24/7 is enlightenment.
No.
Today, that's literally it, right? If you can be mindful every moment, I think that's what it really takes. And it's interesting, this thing of reacting and responding. Very often we see diplomacy, where leaders will speak in their own language. And I was in Japan recently, and we were just discussing, and somewhere the conversation came up that the reason you take time, speak in something someone else translates, it's giving the other person enough time to respond and not react. It's a diplomatic tool that has been used for decades. So sometimes, the person understands the language, but they're still speaking their language. Someone is translating because it's giving you that little pause. So when we talk of leadership in the corporate world, we are talking of leadership at a country and global level. These are tools, maybe practiced differently, right? And done in a very nuanced manner, right? But it exists. And we see the power of all of this. So, getting this into organizations, getting this into homes, getting it into individuals is itself one big, probably a aspect that we can, try and nurture. I know you do this with individuals, at a tremendous level.
At the Brahma Kumaris, we call it traffic control of the mind.
Yes.
It's called traffic control of the mind. So we get people to visualize, what if one day the traffic signals of Mumbai city were not working. So where would you be? You would still be there only, stuck in your traffic jam. You wouldn't even reach where you have to go. Same thing is happening here. Continuous thoughts, no space. Head starts spinning, tea, coffee, overthinking, and yet not taking that time. So what that 1 minute or 2 minutes does it? So what we all have it on our phones. At the centers and in our houses, we have music playing. So it's like when the music plays, irrespective of whatever we are doing, we will pause. Whether we are eating, whether we are in a conversation, whether we are in a meeting, we will pause. For us, it is like that red signal. The only time we don't pause is when we are driving on the road. That's all. But even over there, we pause in terms of checking what I'm thinking. That 1 minute after every hour. It actually changes things. It's same like decluttering on the road with that red signal. Logically, I still don't know how it works, that 1 minute. How is it that it's able to create so much? But it is able to do it. Because that 1 minute gives you the space, it slows down your thinking. It suddenly gives you a different perspective to what you were. We've seen it a lot in conversations. That here you are in the middle of a conversation, there is a difference of opinion. It's also going off to becoming a little, and then that music will play. And then you just pause by default. And after that 1 minute, everybody's tone and coming back into the conversation is completely different. That's all. So we said, then that's time often we say, oh, the traffic control came at the right time. It came at the right time and it saved a lot of things. It just came at the right time.
It prevents the reaction.
So it's very, very powerful. Very powerful. So that 1 minute every hour, then 1 minute like before a meeting, we do 1 minute after a meeting. We've done with a lot of doctors, 1 minute before a surgery. Get your entire unit, not just, see, everybody knows they're going in for a surgery, the doctor also their own prayer, meditation, but they don't do it collectively. So many of them have started doing it collectively. So when everything is ready, absolutely everything, after that they're not going to do anything. Everything is ready, everyone's standing around, there is that patient there. So we always tell them, the patient's family is praying outside. But what about the ones who are actually going to do the surgery? That's more important. So then they all stand together. And not just 1 minute silence, but that 1 minute silence creating the same thoughts. So you're creating a collective energy that this surgery will be a smooth, divine experience. We are instruments. We surrender. You use us for whatever is right for this way. Now that collective energy, not just relaxes the doctor, but also the interns, the young ones who are probably there for the first time.
Probably nervous about what they're doing.
A nurse who was just shouted at outside by another doctor. And it just changes the energy of the operation theatre. And the second time is after the surgery is over. So after the surgery is over, before the doctor is going to leave out of the room, again a minute, gratitude and an affirmation for the well-being. That this patient is going to be perfect, healthy, and back home very soon. And now we've seen so many doctors, they come back and say, the day we forget, it is the nurse who will say, we have to pause. We haven't done our 1 minute. We are not going to begin like this. So it's very
Someone
beautiful.
has to will. So the beauty of this is, right, that 1 minute, an hour with an individual, applying in the corporate place, in the hospital, in every aspect, and maybe
in
a
schools,
2 minute, when you have a leadership.
Most important,
thing.
in schools. What happens when one teacher walks out of the class and the next subject teacher is going to come in? You remember how the environment of the classroom is. It's so noisy, it's so chaotic. So, and what would the teacher do? They'll come and they'll, bang the duster, create more noise. Then they will have to speak louder than 30 children to say. So many teachers have done, just come. You can't force them to do it. You come and stand. Don't use noise to silence noise. Use silence to silence noise. And silence, not just silence here, but silence here. So just come and stand in silence. You create your affirmation or meditation, and that vibration will suddenly bring all of them there. And after some time, they know this is the method with this teacher. So they will automatically get into that 1 minute space when that particular teacher walks in.
I think
noise. Imagine the teacher having to shout over 30 children's voices. That whole learning is not beginning on a right note. It's beginning with such disturbed minds. Silence. Even before a conversation, we do it. Suppose someone comes for a counseling, we will not start talking like that. 1 minute silence, surrender, invoke. What is the answer we need today? You know, that tapping into the intuition.
Yeah.
We don't know what the person is going through. Even if that person talks for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, what is the right thing for that person? Surrender. Silence your mind. I know it. I'll be able to answer their every question. This logic has to go. This intelligence has to be surrendered. Even if you've met 1 lakh people, this one is different. And everyone is sanskar is different. What is right for this person? I don't know. So I have to surrender. So when even you begin your every meeting with that, so we know how to do it. The other person doesn't know it, but even they feel a change in the vibration just by doing that one. So it's powerful.
And more needed in an era where there's a lot of content that is being consumed by this generation. And so going back to you, Kiran, there's entertainment, there's content, that today you're responsible for putting out, right? How do we make entertainment positive, right? How do we make it? I mean, it's an interesting question because people get lured by a thrill, by excitement,
Yeah.
So what is content, engaging content, positive content? How does one look at content? Not necessarily in this conversation, but generally, how is one looking at content today? Or how should one look at content?
It's a topic that I know the three of us are excited about. So, we should, I think we all deserve to share this. I'll start with actually something which is a bit of a joke in my company that, 6 months in, the one thing that everyone says on the content side is if Kiran likes a piece of content, never publish it because it's never going to meet the audience interest. But, in some way, I also feel, I'm a genuine believer that along with technology, content is such an important shaper of society. I think we underestimate the power of content. Today, the sense with which any content creator makes content is to waste time. It's all about saying that how much of your time can I keep you engaged? That is how fundamental premises of a platform are written. Time is the enemy to a content platform. That the more even success metrics are written on the basis of watch time, how many DAUs, how many minutes in a day have you held on? And I don't know, I just have a visceral reaction to it to say that I genuinely don't believe that in the longer run it will add value to anybody. We are going through a phase. And I think I explained that a little bit earlier. Humans are intelligent. They will get to a point where they recognize when something of theirs is getting wasted. We're just going through a period of transition. There was a time when people were Indians are very money conscious. That, in India they say that unless it doesn't matter how much money you have, if there is no value associated with it, things fail very quickly. And our society is built around it. We're not that data conscious. The West is very data conscious. It doesn't matter. They don't take the concept of anything being free. If your data is being seen, they're very aware of it. India probably will get there, but it's not yet. I think the world has to rise up to the fact that the biggest asset amidst of all of this is your time. And yet content is seen as a time wastage tool. Yet when we think about the most memorable movies we have seen, the most memorable songs that are ever written, the most memorable pieces, it's podcasts. It's pieces of content which we felt we invested and we got something out of it. It stayed with us. I mean, I don't get everything into the deep level of sanskar building and character building. No. Yeah. But even entertainment, in my view, has a realm of saying that the purpose of that piece of entertainment and the value has to be defined. So I don't see that in today's world. I think it's a world which has to transition. I think many of it in some way, in fact, it goes to the other extreme. I worry that we put out pieces of content which taps into very dark spaces of humans and we think it's okay. I don't think there's anybody gaining from it. There is no economic, I can get to such details saying we have analyzed pieces of content which go to the genres of exploring the dark side. And 100% of the math tells you that it does not work economically. And so If it doesn't work economically, if it doesn't work socially, then why do we do it? I think it's a question collectively we need to ask ourselves.
It's a very strong ethical question, I would say. And like what you said, because the hours, if we look at data, the number of hours of content consumed in India, around the world, and through social platforms, through every form of content is so large. And you're right, it's impacting people at a very different level. And technology is actually, putting you more in that echo chamber and making you, believe because you made some choices, it suddenly technology recognizes that that's probably what you need more of.
Yeah.
So we are also getting polarized probably as a society.
It is.
So you believe that one day the intuition part will take over and the smarter people will start consuming content correctly? Is that a fair way to think about this? Or how Sister Shivani, how do you think this transformation will happen? I mean, I liked what you said that, from using content as a wasteful thing to meaningful or value-seeking content is one shift. How do you see this transformation? So if you were to look in 10 years from today, I mean, how would you see the shift? Where would you see the shift happen?
Yeah, but the first thing is to understand whether it's right now content consumption or content addiction. See, remember when we were in college, the first person who would try smoking, the first person who would try alcohol, and everybody around them would say, no, you will get addicted to it. And they say, no, I know what I'm consuming and I'll take care that it will never become my addiction. So it started with a consumption, but then somewhere down the line, it became an addiction. And that person lived in this illusion saying, this makes me happy. I feel very good when I have consumed that substance. So that person kept consuming it to feel good, and that feel good substance which that person was consuming was actually depleting that inner strength of the mind and the body. Same thing has happened with content. We started consuming it, feel good, maybe not always to learning, but chalo, I just need a few minutes where basically there's so much noise here. I want a distractor. See, if I have a toothache and I just sit in front of a movie, 3 hours I won't get the pain. After 3 hours, I will say, Acha, it's still hurting. So 3 hours, I distracted my mind from that physical pain. Nowadays, we need distractions from our emotional pain.
Correct.
I've come back from a long day of work. A lot has happened, everything. I need some time where my mind is not going to think about it. So that gives me a feeling there's no pain, there is no stress. So people are calling content consumption a de-stressor. This is a de-stressor. It's making me feel, not letting me think about that work. So even if it's half an hour, 1 hour, de-stressor, they call it a de-stressor, it is a distractor. Your toothache has not disappeared. Your tooth has not healed after 3 hours. In those 3 hours, it's only got worse. But you thought 3 hours you were pain-free, so you just distracted. So this is now a distractor. And now we are just using it thinking it's making me feel good for those. After some time, it is not becoming a content consumption. It's becoming a content addiction. So now I decide I will consume for 15 minutes. But then most of them say, I thought I will do it for 15 minutes, but it went on to half an hour. Sometimes it went on. Once it's an addiction, now it is anyways an energy depleter because it is an addiction, which means now my mind, which was first dependent on situations, dependent on people's behavior, not being able to create my own thoughts, now it has even become dependent on content. So any dependency, any addiction will become a depleter. Now the more I get depleted, the more I need that distractor. Now, more I take that distractor, the more so it's gone into a cycle of a distractor becoming an addiction, causing a depletion, and that taking me more towards that distraction. So it's now gone into a cycle. So we are meeting children who have now come into the 11th class and they know that in 2 years they want to, give those entrance exams for the premier institutes of the country. Brilliant children. Probably who always topped all. Now their parents will say, for these 2 years, you will have to put away this phone.
Correct.
And you just use that simple phone for communication. I mean, the first time I saw it, I sat back with myself. I said, is this the era which is coming? The child wants to become very clear right from when she was this old that I want to become this surgeon in this specialization. She's looking at me and she's saying, yeah, but I can't leave the phone. And I said, you know what, just give it to me for 2 years. I'll keep it here in the center. We will meet the day you finish your exam. You'll have it. She holds it in her hand. It was as helpless as somebody saying, I cannot give up alcohol, even though I want to give up alcohol. I understand. Don't give me the knowledge. Don't give me the logic behind it. I understand, but I can't. And she literally held on to it. She kept it down for 5 minutes, and I was so happy. I thought, like, chalo, yeah, she's understood it. And then she just went into a shell. And after 10 minutes, she said, no, I can't leave it. And she just picked it up and she walked away.
Oh gosh.
It was such
so
it was really, I could
detox,
see it. This is nothing. This is an absolute deep addiction, which the mind is now not able to use logic anymore. That dependency has reached that stage. So that wake-up call will have to be earlier. So at
And
least
Didi, if I may add to what you said, I'm sorry, I'm compelled to say a few things. One is, my wife keeps reminding us, so we've consciously kept our older daughter away from phones. And I think her logic has always been the same thing, to saying that it's not a question, it's a question of not a question of if, it's a question of when in life you're going to get it. But do it at a time when you feel you're responsible of handling what comes through that pipe. And isn't this the biggest duality that we live in? The most powerful tool to educate our children, just because of the indiscipline associated with it, we ask them to stay away from it in their most formative years. And I think just like in any forms of addiction, I think the challenge with content is everything is left to the industry to define its own self-rules and break them. When it came to addiction, laws were put in. When it came to decluttering roads, laws were put in. When things happen at a time when society goes through anarchy, human beings come together and put rules and regulations and boundaries. I think the content industry needs that. There is no regulatory body telling us that there's an entire generation that could benefit and yet not doing it. I think that's one area where I feel deeply passionate about. We actually have not discussed the most disturbing form of content, right? The content, even then, we discuss in the realm of all organized pieces of content and what you and I put together. But I think in this country, youth consumes a piece of content which goes beyond, I mean, there are so many aspects of their personality that gets disturbed by it. If you look at data consumption in this country and where it gets consumed and what kind of content gets consumed, the addiction to porn is so high. Now, what is it leaving a young mind with? How does it leave you healthy in terms of relationships on an interpersonal level? So I think we speak content from a realm of what we can influence, and that, in my view, that's a small piece of the problem. The large piece of the problem is, to Didi's point, it's just addiction that needs to stop. Then we can get to the other parts.
So first, accepting that it's an addiction, and then taking, the steps, whatever detoxification, whatever is needed to make that happen. And I think this is, again, some responsibility, some technology, some regulation that can make that happen is probably going to be the only solution. And of course, strengthening the individual power to be able to say no, when you're mindful about the fact that it is, literally taking you over. So I think it comes back to that same point of, how do we, empower people individually and then collectively, to do more. And, since you are a technology, person, and you've worked with the best technology globally, how do you see technology driving this part, right? Mindfulness. Is there some technology out there that can, be a co-pilot, so to say, to this individual journey that Sister Shivani and, is talking of, or the thing? Is there something like that there, or can we develop something? Can the world do something? Is that an interesting problem to solve for companies, startups? I don't know.
So Rajan, if in my household, if I'm known as a technologist, my kids will laugh, because even though I work for technology, I've tried to keep my boundaries with it. Not because I don't want to, because I feel that it's a slippery slope, just eats into your time. But to your question, I don't think, and I'm going to put myself out there, I don't think the technology world thinks actively or enough about social implications. I think it's a world that is currently driven by economic implications. And we cannot let something so powerful have a unidimensional outcome. 5 of the richest companies in the world are technology companies. And yet every unsolved government problem is in the field of technology. And I do believe that India has a very, very large and influential role to play, simply because our construct is democracy. Our history is a deep understanding of psychology. And our intellect is powerful enough to look beyond what others cannot. Now, which other place can boast of this in abundance? All of this, not just in small quantities, but in abundance. If we cannot solve it, who can?
No, and digital public infrastructure that India's
Yeah.
got is a great example of
100%.
using all of these pieces
Yes.
to do some things differently. So comes back to our opening thing of India's journey, your movement back here, to really shape the future of Bharat as we move ahead. It's been a very engaging conversation, and we wrap this up typically with a little mindful minute session or section.
Sure.
Just a few questions where we'd love to get to know you and some thoughts around this subject. So if you could recommend one technology habit, what would that be?
Oh,
Sorry, I'm going back to technology.
habit, yes.
A technology habit that one should use. What would that be?
I mean, I think the most obvious answer is use it with care. But I think the tool, I'll put it on a tool.
Yeah.
I find my most mindful tool is search, because it's powerful. Because as soon as I'm using search as a tool, I have a very clear intent on what I want to solve for. Right. And once I solve for it, I'm out of technology. So I think my most powerful technology tool, which I use as mindful, is searching. Right? I'm okay with that. So I don't think I have a habit to say, except for the fact that have a controlled use of anything good needs to be done and controlled.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very powerful way of looking at that.
Yeah.
Would you have-
Self-discipline.
Yeah.
Self-discipline in terms of your timings, in terms of how much overcoming that addiction, or maybe never reaching towards an addiction. That self-discipline plays a very important role.
What's the mantra for calming the mind in a busy environment?
1 minute meditation. 1 minute meditation. Simply, it will just do it immediately.
Yeah.
See, 1 minute silence doesn't mean you're silent here. That's not 1 minute silence. You're creating those right set of thoughts in those 1 minute, which will silence the other cluttered thoughts. So nothing better than that.
You have a mantra?
No, I think very similar. It's much more about the ability to constantly respond than react, which very much goes back to what Didi said, just creating space in your mind.
What could be the biggest change you would like to make in the next 20 years?
I'll define it from my, in the current environment, from my workplace, because I see that as my tool for what I can give back to this nation. I think if we can make a world which learns to trust itself on collective consciousness, I think the change will automatically come through. There is abundance of creativity and intelligence in this country. If we can bring that together by saying that instead of individual pieces of intelligence, it's collective consciousness, we learn to trust each other, and we learn to work side by side, I think this nation can define the next way humanity lives. So it is not about what we do, it's about how we do it, in my view, where the biggest transformation lies.
What would you see in the next 2 decades?
Prioritizing emotional fitness. Sankalp Shakti. Sankalp Shakti is the biggest wealth we have. If we use that wealth the right way, everything else will fall into place.
I think these are the true problems of the world. Like today, whatever we are seeing is because we don't trust one another, or the world is so polarized.
Correct.
For multiple reasons, for multiple vested interests. You talk of technology being driven by economic interest rather than the do-good. So I think these are so truly reflective of the challenges that we all see. And I think even as an audience who's watching this understands and relates to on a day-to-day basis. And even the solutions are relatively very simple. But for that, each has to step up and take action. And I think that's the powerful message that we are taking out here today. Do your part and do it with others collectively, and the world will change. So again, thank you so much, Kiran, for sparing your time, being here on this podcast, and sharing such wonderful insights. And of course, Sister Shivani, for your lovely radiance and touching the right points as needed to always. Just make it glow in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you.
You too can start or enhance your mindfulness journey using the ThinkRight app on iOS and Android store. It's got a huge number of daily affirmations, daily journeys, daily meditations that will enable us to hold your hand as you move in this transformative journey of life.